Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Sports Ballers podcast. I'm Evan Ash, joined as always by Corey Puffett and Eric Meyer. Today on the show, we're going to talk a little NBA. There's some news out of college football and tennis and cycling. Oh dear, a lot of cycling. But we'll start in Major League Baseball with the O's who've just been crushing everybody the last month or so. Their Orioles are winners of 12 of their last 19 games. They've clinched their first winning month since August of 2017. And if y'all remember, that was the Tim Beckham got acquired in a trade and exploded and then immediately cooled off and became terrible for 2 years after that. So I said, might as well just close Pratt Street right now and get ready for the World Series parade. This is amazing. So last night, the Orioles annihilated the Mariners, Eric's former Mariners, 9-2, hitting 5 home runs, including Rutschman, Mountcastle, Santander, Hayes, and Mateo, back-to-back home runs and back-to-back innings for 4 of the 5 of them. So I did not stay up to watch, but that was incredible. And then since our last show, the Orioles are 5-2. They split with the Nationals in a 2-game series, took 3 out of 4 from the White Sox in Chicago, and then beat the Mariners, like I said, last night. So let's see what else. Austin Hayes last week against the Nationals became the 6th Oriole to hit for the cycle, joining Brooks Robinson, Cal Ripken Jr., Aubrey Huff, Felix P.A., and Jonathan VR. So that was pretty cool. And then the White Sox series, the White Sox just couldn't hang with the Orioles. It was just there. It wasn't even a series, right? The Orioles just rolled into town, smacked them around, and then rolled out to Seattle.
Yeah, what happened to the White Sox, Evan? You had them going to the World Series. You had them.
They stink like cheese. They suck. They're terrible. There were multiple chants of fire Tony from the White Sox crowd.
To be fair,
I don't blame them.
Yeah,
I agree.
Those chants probably should have been happening even before the Orioles almost swept them.
Yeah. So let's see. Dirk, what do you think of the O's in their most recent performance?
I think it's great. Obviously, they've been playing really good baseball. They've been fun. Even the game they lost to the White Sox, they made interesting late. They didn't lose 10-2 or something like the Orioles used to regularly do that. And they're 35-40. I mean, it's not unrealistic if this team continues to play this way that they could finish 500 or better. I mean, I'm not putting that expectations on them, but they're not that far away, and I think people have kind of slept on that a little bit, that because the Orioles have been bad for so long at this point, for basically 5 straight years, and because there were limited expectations of this team this year due to obvious reasons. Most of their young prospects hadn't come up yet, and we were coming off of a season where the Orioles had lost 100-plus games again. But I think that this is closer to what the Orioles are now than what they looked like previously. I don't think this is a mirage. I think this team actually looks like a competent team at the moment. And I think a big part of the reason why, obviously, Austin Hayes has been great and Trey Mancini's played well. The bullpen has been tremendous. And Adley Rutschman's been a big contributor. I mean, he's when he first got called up, you had some reactionary fools on Orioles Twitter saying he needs to be sent back down to AAA because he's not hitting after 9 games. And we all knew that Adley was ready to be in the show. It was just a matter of getting your timing down, figuring some things out. Because if you watch his at-bats, they weren't yielding hits, but he looked like a professional hitter up there. He didn't look like some guy that was overwhelmed. He was seeing every pitch. He wasn't chasing a bunch of crap. He usually had some of the best at-bats the Orioles had during those stretches of games. He just wasn't making solid contact and getting hits. And it was obvious that that was going to come. And it has arrived. I mean, yesterday he went 2 for 5, hit a home run, but he easily could have hit another double. He smashed a ball into the gap, and Julio Rodriguez, I believe, ran it down, made a great play. Credit to him. But I was like, that could have easily been a 3-hit, multi-extra base hit game for Adley Rutschman. And just it feels like everything that he had been doing before, where he looked comfortable but the contact just wasn't there, that has completely changed, as you would expect for a great young player. And at this point, he's legitimately, despite the fact that batting average is still pretty low, by Major League standards, he's an above average hitter just because of the power he's provided. It's a regular extra base hit guy. Like he's got more extra base hits than he's got singles at this point. So really excited to see what he's done. It's good to see Cedric Mullins is making all these slick plays in the outfield. His bat's starting to come around as well. I mean, it's a solid team, and it's only going to get better as some of these other prospects come up. And we talked about Gunnar Henderson and some of the other guys that have been promoted and are absolutely crushing it at AAA. And everybody in the system is taking that next step and is thriving. So, I mean, come next year, this team should have legitimate expectations. And when I say legitimate expectations, that doesn't mean you got to make the playoffs. But what I mean is, hopefully next September, we're sitting there at the start of it, maybe even the first week of the football season, saying, hey, I actually want to see what the Orioles are doing today, because they're not outside the realm of possibility of making the playoffs. That's where they should be. They should be in the hunt, at least, next year.
I mean, Eric, you mentioned they could be 500 or better this year.
Yeah.
Like, with the expanded playoffs, that's in the mix right there. You don't have to be much above 500 to be in the mix for the postseason anymore.
Right. I just don't want to get ahead of myself by heaping expectations
certainly.
on a team that has played very well, but really has only played very well for all of maybe 5-6 weeks. Like that feels like, oh, hey, playoffs times now, right? It's like, no, relax. We just got done losing 100-plus games for like 4 straight years. Let's baby steps. And this is a key baby step that we are taking right now, and I think it's here to stay.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, saying they should close Pratt Street for the World Series parade, obviously that is in jest, but it's just fun when your team is good.
I mean, just to put this stretch in perspective, I'm going to mention the Yankees, but not because that's my team, just because they are the best team in baseball right now. The Yankees' winning percentage so far this season is .730, right? Over the past 19 games, the Yankees have won 14. That's a .736 average. That's higher than their season-long winning percentage, and the Orioles are only 2 games behind that over that stretch. So the Yankees, who are as hot as they have been at any point this season, really, are only 2 games better than the Orioles over that, almost 3-week stretch. That's some really good baseball out of the Orioles.
Sure.
It's some great baseball out of the Orioles. I mean,
again, it's important to keep it in perspective. It's just a few weeks.
Sure.
But there's no flukes over 162 games.
It's absolutely worth being excited about.
Yeah, and again, the fact that the team is actually exciting to watch. Like, it's not like I could get behind this team if they were only on pace to win like 68 games. If I felt like there was something building, like if they weren't winning like this, if the bullpen sucked and they lost some games for the Orioles and caused us not to be 35-40, but more like 31-44, which clearly not as impressive of a record, but you could still say, okay, but Austin Hayes is hitting the hell out of the ball, and
Adley Rutschman is exciting.
And Brian Mountcastle hitting bombs. Like you still see the progress, and then
you've still got Cedric Mullins, and you've got some other guys who have been there who are also
the lineup. And I said this at the beginning of the season, and I pointed it out to Evan. I said this lineup has potential to look really, really exciting when Adley gets called up. Just looking at the top 6 guys in the lineup, and I've been proven right.
Yeah, no, it is exciting.
We know these guys can play, and I thought Austin Hayes proved it last year that he's at the very least an above-average major league player when he's healthy, And this year it looks like he's going to be an all-star. So.
And you said, like, even if the bullpen was, kind of sucking and blowing some games, but one of the other things that's exciting about the Orioles is, like, they have at least one really good bullpen guy in Jorge Lopez. He's been excellent over the past 5 or 6 weeks.
Yep. Jorge Lopez, who they got off the scrap heap from Kansas City, I think. Where did this guy come from? He was terrible. And like, oh, well, we'll just put him in the bullpen. And he's been lights out. What is happening? Who are these people and what did they do with the Orioles? That's my question. So, yeah, going back to Adley, he's slashing 327, 373, 673 in his last 15 games. And then last night's game.
Over 1,000.
Yes.
That's really strong.
He's great.
Yeah, and his presence behind the plate has done nothing but help the pitching staff.
Yes. I think that's underrated. The way he frames pitches and the way he catches a ball so gracefully. Maybe I'm just seeing a halo around him because he's Adley Rutschman, right? And we've been waiting for this for 3 years now. But the way he catches the ball and frames it perfectly for the umpire. MLB Network did a montage of Adley framing some pitches that just missed, and the umpire brings them up. Like, oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, and
that's the Adley effect right there.
Yeah, in the world where we don't have robot umpires, pitch framing is still a really key skill for catchers. And beyond just that, the fact that he seems to block everything, he's got a great arm. People don't run on him. Like he's like since day one, we knew that he was going to be a spectacular defensive catcher. It was just a matter of when the bat was going to come around, and the bat's here. And I pointed out that he got to his first career win above replacement after he hit his home run yesterday, and he did that in 30 games. And that's with a rough start as expected for a rookie. That's a pace of 5 WAR season over the course of a full 162. And that's what you call a superstar where I come from. So, again,
a superstar.
Not getting too far ahead of ourselves, but even despite the fact that he had a really rough first couple of weeks in the show, he's performed at a level that says this guy is going to be really good for a really long time.
I like how Eric says not getting too far ahead of ourselves after throwing out the superstar word. Like, what would be further ahead than superstar? Isn't that about as far ahead as you can get?
Yeah. Yes. You could say Jesus Christ superstar before. But I didn't say that Adley Rutschman today is a superstar. I said that pace of performance is superstar level, which I think is a fair take. Just like the Orioles have played like a pennant contender for the last 3 weeks. But we know they're realistically not, but that's okay.
I mean, let's just have fun right now, right?
I'm having fun. I tweeted it last night. I was like, I'm having a lot of fun here.
Yeah,
Dongs After Dark.
Yeah, you also tweeted that. Dongs After Dark.
Yes, Dongs After Dark. Shout out to Bird's Eye View podcast. Let's see. Worth noting about last night. So Adley, who went to Oregon State, he's from Oregon. So he returned to the Pacific Northwest for the first time as a major leaguer last night, playing in front of family and friends, including his grandfather and role model, Ad Rutschman, for the first time. So, of course, Adley rises to the occasion and hits a home run. And, as he's rounding third, points at his family in the crowd.
And we've talked about this before. It's not exactly easy to hit home runs in that ballpark because, the saltwater air from the ocean is kind of kills anything in the air.
Well, it was easy for the Orioles last night.
It was easy for the O's last night.
Yeah.
Kevin Brown called it home run derby. So
love Kevin Brown.
Yeah. The other guy I want to mention is the Orioles claimed off of waivers Jonathan Arauz from Boston on June 15th, and he hit a home run in Chicago on Sunday. Just another guy who we just found somewhere who's contributing. And, I think I can't remember how Scott Garceau pronounced Arauz, but it wasn't like that.
Usually it's not with him. And I think we'll get to the Mariners a bit later, so I'll save what I have to say for that. Because it affected last night's game.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about
it. Yeah. We will get to the Mariners shortly. Yes. So the Orioles Got 2 more in Seattle tonight and tomorrow. I believe tomorrow's like an afternoon 4 Eastern start or something like that.
That's not bad.
Yeah. And then
Where
they have
were
an off
those
day
when Eric was a
Thursday.
Mariners fan?
They
always
were-
had to stay up until 10.
No, they had
For the game to
occasional
start.
4:00 games during the week, and usually I would get home from school and the Mariners would be down 2-0. I'd be like, okay, I don't have to watch this anymore.
2-0, insurmountable for the
Yes.
Mariners.
1-0.
It
It
was.
was insurmountable.
Yeah.
It was
The
infuriating.
number of times that Felix lost a 1-0 game.
He did so on national
Wasn't
TV.
Felix's perfect game a 1-0 game?
Yeah, and the run scored on an error. Yeah.
He might still be pitching.
Yeah. Yeah, I was getting very frustrated because it was around the 5th inning when, like, I noticed Felix had a perfect game so far, and I was like, it's a little early to get excited about it, but I was like, but Felix is a beast, and at that point he had flirted with no-hitters a couple of times prior in his career.
Yeah, he was in his prime.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay, maybe today's the day it actually goes down, but I was like, team better score a damn run, make sure that it can actually happen, because it doesn't count. You can go 27 up, 27 down, and if it's still 0-0, it ain't a perfect game. It's not a perfect game till the game's over. And
you've
like,
pitched the entire thing.
yeah,
and
you've
not
had to
given
put-
up
yeah,
a base
you
runner
have to do
or
it all.
an error or anything.
And so I was like, the Mariners got a runner on third. There was 2 outs, and I was like, jeez, this is the only chance they're gonna have to score because they're a bunch of bums. And they're playing the Rays, and the Rays were pretty good. I think the Rays made the playoffs that year.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not going well. And then I guess Evan Longoria, of all people, boots a ball at third base that should have ended the inning. And the Mariners scratch across a run, and I was like, I remember just looking at it, not really thinking that seriously about the perfect game, but more like thinking about winning the game. And I was like, well, you know the deal, King. That's got to be it. Like, you can't give up. You can't give any back. I know that's tough, but that's the business you've chosen, being the cornerstone pitcher for the Seattle Mariners in the early 2010s. Like, it's not going to happen. But yeah, then he just rolled after that. And then I went to an Orioles game that night. The Orioles were playing the Red Sox, and they showed my boy as like the out-of-town scores and things around baseball, and they put it up there, and I was like, yep, there's my guy. He's about to finish off this perfect game. I already knew what happened because it happened like an hour before that. I was like, awesome. That was a good time.
Nice. I remember Jose Fernandez. He had thrown a no-hitter, but like the Marlins hadn't scored any runs until the 9th inning. So like Fernandez hadn't given up any runs through 9 innings, and then the Marlins walk it off in the bottom of the 9th, and Fernandez is the on-deck batter. He was about to hit for himself again. So that was pretty crazy. So yeah, you can pitch as well as you want, but like you got to score some runs too. Yeah. So wrapping up the Orioles, they got off day Thursday before starting a 3-game weekend series in Minnesota. Oh boy. So Corey, what's going on with the Yankees? They've forgotten how to lose games. They just don't anymore.
Yeah, they certainly have not forgotten how to fall behind in games, and they did forget how to hit for about a game and 2/3. But the Yankees earned their Major League leading 23rd come-from-behind victory last night. They batted around in the 7th inning. In fact, 10 batters came to the plate in the 7th inning. Thanks in part to 2 consecutive catcher interference calls against A's catcher Sean Murphy, with Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton both reaching on the catcher's interference. Unfortunately, I did not get any points, and neither did Eric for that, for fantasy purposes. But that come-from-behind victory yesterday came after 2 come-from-behind victories in the Astros series. So they had a 4-run bottom of the 9th on Thursday to come back and walk off against Houston 7-6. So they were down 6-3 going into the bottom of the 9th inning and won in 9. And then they scored 3 runs across the 7th and 8th innings on Sunday to force extras before Aaron Judge hit a 3-run walk-off homer in the bottom of the 10th so that the Yankees could win 6-3. And then those came after a comeback win against the Rays on Wednesday, where they were down 4-1 entering the 6th and came back for a 5-4 victory. So, the starters have been a little bit choppy this past week, but the offense has come alive for the most part. The Yankees were no-hit on Saturday in a 3-0 loss to Houston. And then on Sunday, they were being no-hit through 6 innings. before that comeback win that I mentioned just a moment ago. So they were on their way to becoming the first Major League team in history to be no-hit in consecutive games. It's never happened before, and thankfully my team does not become the first to have that done to them. But right now the Yankees are 7 games ahead of the field. They've got a 54-20 record. They're ahead of the Mets at 47-27. Dodgers and the Astros are 45-27. So the Yankees just keep rolling. I mentioned earlier they've won 14 of their last 19 games, which is actually a slightly better rate of winning than their overall season winning percentage. So they're doing everything they need to stay on a really strong trajectory. Talking about tonight, the Yankees play the second of a 3-game set against the Athletics. And they've got a kid named J.P. Sears making just his 3rd career appearance and his 2nd career start. He pitched a couple of scoreless frames back in April in relief appearances, and then he made his first start a month ago on May 25th against Baltimore, where he went 5 scoreless. But young guy, fairly young guy, I should say. He was acquired by the Yankees back in 2017 after being drafted that season in the 11th round by the Mariners. And while the Yankees have a pretty solid set of arms, and they're all healthy, like none of our pitchers are injured, at least not as far as the starters. I guess Boone wanted to give everybody an extra day of rest, given that they did have a little bit of a rocky week with only 2 quality starts over the past 7 days, and they're entering the final third of a stretch of 20 games in 20 days. So it definitely is nice to have somebody who's showing some promise, who can come up for a spot start. He's likely going to be sent back down to AAA immediately after tonight's game. But part of the reason that the Yankees have this 20 games in 20 days stretch, this Thursday was supposed to also be an off day for the Yankees. But after they finish up this series with the Astros, they're going to play in Houston for 1 game on Thursday and then go to Cleveland for a 3-game set. So this kind of goes back to the beginning of the season when we missed the first week of baseball, and they decided, well, we're just going to make up those 5 or 6 games for most teams over the course of the season. So this is one of those makeups. Yankees have to play on what was supposed to be an off day on Thursday. So it's going to be a lot of traveling. You got to travel all the way from New York to Texas for 1 day and then travel straight up north to Cleveland. And really it's north and east to Cleveland. But that's where the Yankees are at right now. Still playing pretty good ball. Just need to, hopefully the starters can get it back together, because the starters were looking really good through most of the season, and they've kind of slacked off a little bit. Thankfully, the bats have picked up the slack.
Got a question. Your boy Nestor Cortez, where is he? No mention of him in the write-up.
Yeah, no, not this week, because he had another rough week. I think he only pitched once during the past week, but it was like it was either 5 innings or 5 1/3, and he gave up 4 runs. I think the Yankees wound up winning that game, but they had to come back. And it's his first year, so like I'm kind of chalking it up to he's going to have some bumps along the road, but we'll see if he can figure it out. The big thing that concerns me right now with the Yankees is everything with the Aaron Judge contract situation, because like if the Yankees screw this up and Aaron Judge is not a Yankee next year, like the Yankees could fathomably win the World Series this year, and I might not be able to like bring myself to root for them next year if they muck that situation up the way that they appear to be on the path toward doing.
I think you've gotten a little too used to ditching teams. The fact that you wanted to bail on the New York Yankees.
Oh, so this also goes back to the Washington.
Yeah, maybe you're feeling a little too free and loosey-goosey. You're out in the open market. You're out in the town, feeling all pretty. And now Corey's like, damn, I might do this with my baseball team too if they step out of line. I mean, like, you got out of an abusive relationship with the team.
Yeah, and this is not abusive, but it's embarrassing. This would be so embarrassing.
See, the thing is, I was with you. I probably still am, but I also have thought about it. I was like, Aaron Judge is 30. And big-ass contracts to 30-year-olds historically have been unfortunate for the teams that dole them out. So I'm sure that's probably where the Yankees' misgivings are coming from. So while I think that Judge obviously deserves his bag, and he bet on himself this year, and he's winning, emphatically winning, because he's the clear-cut MVP in the American League so far this year. I also understand sort of the Yankees' trepidation, but at the same time, the Yankees also have to understand it ain't the good old days anymore where Aaron Judge walks out the door and you can just go pluck the next guy off of somebody else's payroll because you've got infinite funds. The Yankees have shown that they are less than willing to abuse the luxury tax. Just about every team that has a big market behind them and a high payroll historically has really cut back on the idea of exceeding the luxury tax in any excessive way. And also, other teams have revenue. Like, they have access to it because of the revenue sharing. It's just a matter of whether or not they decide to go for it. So it's not as easy for the Yankees to simply say, oh, well, this guy's 30. Maybe don't want to give him one, but we can go get this 25-year-old. You know, the next big thing, the next Alex Rodriguez or somebody like that. So it's a little bit of a be careful what you wish for because, like, let's face it, the Yankees are great this year, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to win the pennant. It doesn't guarantee you're going to win the World Series. The playoffs are a crapshoot. You have to put yourself in a position to extend your window for as long as possible. And letting Aaron Judge go when he probably has at least 3 or 4 more high-quality prime years in him, if not more.
Yeah, if not more. Yeah.
You know, just because you're worried about getting screwed on the back end, that's going to derail your championship window. So you better get it done this year, but then at the same time, it's a real bad look. If your best player walks after you win a title, and then you're like, well, damn, we could have won a couple of these, but now we got this one, and we just said that's good enough for us.
Exactly. Like I would rather be overpaying for a completely washed up Aaron Judge, you know, when he's 36, 37 years old, or maybe even a little bit before that, but have had our window for these next 5 years of, you know, making it to the ALCS just about every year and hopefully making it to a couple of those World Series and maybe even winning a couple of them. Like, that's the goal. Like, as you just said, the playoffs in baseball are such a crapshoot that you can't count on, you know, being a team of destiny in any one year, because teams of destiny lose all the time in the playoffs. You know, you get a bad roll, a bad bounce, somebody gets a little bit lucky or hot. You know, a player gets cold for you. You have a bad start by your ace or whatever might happen. Like, those things happen all the time in baseball, and the best team doesn't always wind up making it to the World Series, much less winning it. So you have to give yourself as many shots as you can to get there and hope that you come away with one, and be extremely grateful if you come away with more than one.
Yeah, and aside from just the cold calculation of trying to win championships, there's something to be said for keeping your guy around. Like, Aaron Judge came up through the Yankees farm system. Yeah. I don't know how they acquired him, if they drafted him or if they acquired him.
I'm pretty sure they drafted him.
I think they drafted him.
I'm 90% sure the Yankees drafted him.
Yeah, so
he was a college player out of Fresno State, I think.
And not that it even matters. Like, Fernando Tatis was not drafted by the Padres. He was
developed by them.
Right, like, he's their guy.
As was Aaron Judge for the Yankees.
Aaron Judge has never played for another major league team.
No.
And he came up and was sort of a revelation for the Yankees because we all thought he kind of sucked in 2016.
Especially given the fact that he was as old as he was. And
he was also a very old prospect.
To the show.
Yeah, we thought he was a bum. So those of us that, you know, were hoping that he would just go back to looking like a bum, we're like, yeah, that 2017's a fluke. And then it turns out, no, he's actually legit. But, like, I can compare this to the Washington Capitals, where the Caps won the Stanley Cup in 2018. And before, during, and after, sort of, they doled out probably, you know, overpaid, or maybe not overpaid, but gave older players lengthy contract extensions to keep the core together, knowing full well that, and I've said this for a couple of years, the Caps window at this point is probably closed, being as a realistic Stanley Cup contender. Of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs are also a crapshoot. Side note, shout out to the Avs for winning the Cup. Yeah. But typically, when your dudes are all in your the mid-30s, you're probably not going to be able to keep up with some of these younger teams and be as physical. And so when the Caps did that, I said, hell yeah, I'm glad they did it. Knowing full well that we'd end up right in this situation, that the team probably isn't going to win a Stanley Cup again with this core, because I was like, there's something about keeping that group together and letting them go out trying to win it as long as they can. And if they come up short, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Oh, you mean these great players that you fell in love with are still here? So what? That's not the worst thing in the world to watch. The team that actually did something that nobody had ever done for you age out with your squad. I don't think that is the worst thing in the world. And it's a lot worse to trade the guys too early and have them go somewhere else to make a difference while you struggle to even make the playoffs or something like that. You got to keep the group together when you've got a chance to do something special. That's just how I feel about it from a fan's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it too. So that is why I would have a very difficult time, I think, getting excited about the Yankees or being a fan of them next year if they don't have Aaron Judge back.
I mean, I questioned Aaron Judge's,
or at least make a legitimate offer, like a good offer to him.
I questioned Aaron Judge's Hall of Fame potential just because he got started so late.
Oh yeah,
And I was like, I don't know if he's got it, but I mean, if he's gonna play at this level for a few more years, I'm like, damn, this dude's going to the Hall of Fame. And you're the New York Yankees. You're not supposed to let your Hall of Famers go somewhere else. You get other people's Hall of Famers. You get Reggie Jackson. You get Alex Rodriguez, who should be in the Hall of Fame. You get Roger Clemens. You don't let them go.
Yeah, at the very least, Aaron Judge should be able to play long enough to make it into Monument Park, even if he doesn't end up being a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Monument Park, as they say. So yeah, let's see. Sort of staying along the same lines of a guy who, was homegrown and somehow allowed to leave. Freddie Freeman today fired his agent and agency, I guess, over the way his free agency period was handled. I read the article, I think it was on ESPN today, about how it seemed like Freddie wanted to stay with the Braves, but there was some sort of miscommunication where the agency imposed a deadline over accepting the deal or something, and the Braves didn't call back at the deadline. And once the time had expired, the Braves just kind of assumed that Freddie didn't want to stay for whatever offer was on the table at the time. And so that's when they put together that Matt Olson trade and signing. So it sounds like I said, just a miscommunication, and they let a franchise player get away.
I'm curious though, because we're almost halfway through the season now, and he's been playing with the Dodgers for almost half of a season, and he's just now getting around to firing his agent.
Well, they just played in Atlanta, and he was very emotional.
The Dodgers just played the Braves this past weekend,
yeah,
maybe that's where,
because they had
Freddie Freeman was very emotional
this season too. But I guess
in LA, this was his return to Cobb County, and he was clearly he was very emotional when he got his World Series ring, and that's normal.
So they gave him the World Series ring this weekend?
Yeah, they presented it to him in a pregame ceremony. And that's a normal reaction when you were a beloved Brave. Like if Adam Jones ever came back to Baltimore or something like that, and he got emotional, I wouldn't be like, that's weird. No, but I didn't think anything of it. But then when I saw this story, I was like, oh yeah, this dude's pissed that he's not playing with Atlanta. Like he's feeling regret right now that he's a Dodger. And my reaction to that is obviously, how messed up is it that he didn't stay with the Braves? But also, what the hell do you do if you're the Dodgers?
Right, because now this guy clearly doesn't really want to be here.
He doesn't really want to be here. And obviously, Freddie Freeman's probably going to be a professional. He's not going to go out there mope and
he
suck.
He is a professional. He's a good dude.
Yeah, but it's still just something that you're like, damn. This guy would rather play for another team who, by the way, the Braves got hot, so they're back in the pennant race. It's kind of weird. Especially because the Braves put them out of the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, sticking with the Braves, Kenley Jansen, their closer, has been put on the injured list with an irregular heartbeat. That came across today. So obviously wishing him the best, right? Not only just in baseball, but you kind of need your heart to be functioning properly in your life. So
this was
wishing him a speedy recovery.
This is something he dealt with when he was a Dodger. It's actually
I thought I'd heard about this before.
It was actually sort of like that starting point where he was a dominant closer. Then he missed a bunch of time because he had to deal with his heart issues, and it took him a while to get back to being an effective closer after that. So, obviously health first takes the priority, but you also hope that when he gets it resolved, it's not going to be a
another
derailing
long
moment
period
of his
trying
career
to find his way back, especially because he is getting older. His window of time to be a dominant closer is closing, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. All right, Bryce Harper of the Phillies is out indefinitely with a broken thumb after being hit by a pitch. I believe this happened yesterday or Saturday.
Yeah.
One day. I don't even know what day of the week it is. So yeah, he's out for a while. This is unfortunate. It just sucks. Bryce Harper's had he's had a sort of snake bitten year this year. Like, doesn't he have the elbow thing that just why he can't play in the field anymore, and then he gets hit in the hand by a pitch, and he's just it just sucks for Harper, for the Phillies, and for baseball as a whole. We can't see a great player play because of all these injuries.
Yeah, and initially it seemed like the reports were very pessimistic, like he might not play again this season. Now they're saying he's going to get surgery, and he does have the hope to play again this season. But it's been a rough run here for Bryce this year.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, again, he's playing for the Phillies, which doesn't feel like it should be Major League Baseball Siberia, but at times it is, even though it's one of the biggest markets and it's on I-95 and, we're 2 hours away. But it feels
you
like...
You can see the stadium from I-95.
Yes, and so I just... It's easy to forget just how good he's been this year. Like, his OPS is north of, 1,000 again. And this is coming off of a season where he won the MVP. He led the National League in OPS last year. And so it just feels like he's quietly been having these excellent years in Philly, and nobody notices because the Phillies just aren't relevant in October. And I feel like this year they still weren't going to be, but it was not, because, like, the thing is, something I always noticed with Bryce, when he played for the Nats, he could never string together back-to-back good seasons, usually because he'd get hurt. And it looked like this year, it's like, oh, geez, Bryce Harper's killing the ball. He's he might challenge for another MVP, and then he gets hurt, and he's going to miss 6 weeks, and probably going to derail any hope the Phillies have of staying in the pennant race that they kind of got themselves back into after they fired Joe Girardi. And it's obviously going to affect the rest of his season. Even if he is able to come back, it takes a while to get back into a rhythm.
Yeah.
Like, it's like 6 weeks out, but you don't get a spring training. You got a week of rehab down in the farm, and then you come up, and now you got to hit major league pitching after you've been in cold storage for 2 months. That's a doozy. So he could easily come back in late August and just struggle, and everybody's going, oh, Bryce Harper sucks. I'm like, no, he's just had his season interrupted by an injury. And shout out to Bryce though, really, for the way he handled it, because understandably, you break a finger, you know it immediately. And he knew as soon as he got hit that he was in trouble. And he was understandably frustrated and pissed off. And Blake Snell clearly did not do it on purpose. And Bryce wanted to make sure he understood, even as he's furious the fact that his season is being derailed by what appears to be an obvious injury. He took the time to still acknowledge Blake Snell's apology and say, I know it's fine. It's not on you. And I was just like, that's what it should be. When it doesn't have to turn into a debacle because somebody accidentally hit you. It's part of baseball. It's a shame that it happened, but
But it's interesting because that never happens. Like, even when the other guy didn't mean to, you almost never see a batter acknowledge the apology or be like, I know you didn't mean to. It's like, it's
especially
fine.
In that circumstance.
And if anything, a lot of times people still get pissed off at the pitcher and try to charge them out, even when it's obvious that it wasn't intentional.
Well, Harper's not going to charge them out with a broken thumb, but clearly. But my point is that he just had.
It's also not something you would have expected from Bryce Harper, because Bryce can run a little hot sometimes.
Well, the one time he charged.
Remind everybody
out,
the last time he charged them out.
He got tuned up a little bit, but he was justified in charging them out after Hunter Strickland. That guy was out of line.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As a totally valid mound charge, it was just an unfortunate outcome for Bryce because he lost that fight.
And
Had a
for
bad helmet
Michael
toss.
Morse, who never played again after that,
Yeah.
I think. Or Samardzija, one of those big dudes got hurt. Never
Heard from him again.
Yeah. Is that it on Bryce?
That's it for me.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well,
Speaking of brawls,
yeah. Speaking of brawls and Donnybrooks on a baseball field,
Brouhahas.
yes, a brouhaha, if you will. The Mariners and the Angels had a dust up on the field on Sunday. So it was Mariners outfielder Jesse Winker got hit in the behind by a pitch, and he was just, looking at the Angels dugout and started walking over there and kept walking and kept walking. It wasn't a full-on Amir Garrett situation where, I'm tired of all of y'all and now you need to hear about it type of thing. But, yeah, the Angels poured out of the dugout and, it was on after that. So John Boy did a tremendous breakdown on YouTube.
he
It's like
always does
15
great
minutes long.
breakdowns.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Every time, apparently, like whenever there's a brawl or something, John Boy just gets lit up and is mentioned like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Like, sounds exhausting, to be honest, finding all these angles and stuff and trying to read everybody's lips. But so, check out the John Boy breakdown if you haven't already. But Phil Nevin, the Angels interim manager, received a 12-game suspension. He seems to have beclowned himself this past weekend, I must say. Jesse Winker suspended for 7 games, but he played last night against the Orioles
Because he was appealing.
he's
He's appealing.
That's
well,
what-
same thing with JP Crawford, the
JP
shortstop.
Crawford.
Yeah, because he got like a 5-game suspension.
Well,
Didn't you pick him up in fantasy today?
I did. Well, I picked him up yesterday. He scored minus 1.25, and so I dropped him today.
Like this was
okay.
this is what I wanted to circle back to when we were talking about the Orioles.
Yes.
Like shout out to Jesse Winker, who not only got key members of the Mariners suspended for this series against the Orioles, he decided to appeal, and then he goes out there in the first inning and just completely blows a fly ball. Like just stops running after it, thinking the center fielder was going to come get it, and it lands between him and rolls to the wall, and the Orioles scored a quick run, and I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. And yeah, it's just, and the thing is, this whole thing was Jesse Winker's fault.
Oh yeah.
Like he was the one that couldn't handle the situation like a grown-up and started the fight. And that resulted in all these dudes getting suspended. It resulted in that one idiot throwing the sunflower seeds on the field after the fight was over. And just acting like a damn fool. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me with this. Like this is embarrassing.
Yes. What I think is even more embarrassing, the next guy, Anthony Rendon,
The face
who had a
mush.
cast on his arm, Angels third baseman, who's on the injured list after having surgery. He's been banned from sitting on the bench for 7 games and will serve a 5-game suspension when he returns from injury. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. He did a lefty face mush on Jesse Winker, I believe. Well, his other arm was in a cast. What are
he
you
didn't
doing?
use his cast as a club.
Yeah. What are you doing right now?
Just hit him with the face mush.
Utterly ridiculous. Lots of other people got suspended and banned and whatever,
Including interpreter. Yeah, the interpreter, Manny Del
interpreter
Campo.
Manny Del Campo was suspended for 2 games. The interpreter got suspended. How does that happen? Unbelievable. So, the Angels, also these 2 teams, y'all are acting a fool of yourselves because y'all aren't even good, right? You're struggling to stay ahead of the Orioles in the standings. That's not where you want to be. So, maybe you should stop the beanball war and try to win some baseball games. A little bit. It's just a suggestion out of me. So Mariners manager Scott Service he got ejected, but he did not get suspended. So, oh my God, what are y'all?
I
say about
can't
this?
imagine trying to start a fight with a team that features both Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, Do you want
Those are
to
some
fight
big dudes.
Shohei Ohtani? The dude's a Super Saiyan. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
He's huge. He's bigger than all y'all. He's probably faster than all y'all.
Mike Trout is bigger than all of them.
Yeah, and
too.
faster than all y'all. Like, those two dudes, that'd be insane, man. Like, you can't fight both of those guys. You guys gonna die.
They have.
These are like the
They have
two best
Noah
players in
Syndergaard,
baseball
too.
besides maybe Aaron Judge.
I'm not playing.
And Aaron Judge is also bigger and faster than anybody on
Yeah,
the
I'm not fighting
Mariners.
him either. That dude just one arm me like a grizzly bear. Just wah. We were discussing, Evan and I were talking about grizzly bears and coyotes, and I informed Evan, like, you can beat up a coyote. Like, if you came across a coyote, like a wild coyote, and you wanted to mess with you could definitely beat one up. They're not very big.
Yeah, I feel like they're quick and vicious.
You could definitely beat up a coyote. They're scavengers. You'll be fine. You can't beat up a grizzly bear, though. You're dead meat. You better just run and hope he is too lazy or gets tired or something.
Or trips.
Yeah, trips.
Or you just run faster than the person you're with. It's
Yeah,
really,
exactly. Don't have to outrun the bear.
Just make
have
sure
to
that Mike
outrun
Trout
you.
is with you. Bears love Trout.
Corey, you're not even married yet, and you're making dad jokes. This is outrageous.
It is, right?
That's
You know,
not-
this is
that's-
a full-on, no more
That's
talking
not
about
going in the
parking
title
lots.
list either.
Yeah, so, what is Phil Nevin strikes me as just, he really irritated me with this. Like, what it seemed clear after the John Boy breakdown that the Angels pitcher, whose name is Wantz, Wantz,
That bothered me too.
was inserted into the game as the opener just to throw at the Mariners batters, like right off the top. And it seemed like the Mariners might have been expecting it a little bit, in the
Well, who came
Scott
in
Service
for
gesture.
him?
Huh?
Who came in for him to pitch after he was ejected?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Somebody,
Like,
some guy.
I'm curious, like, did they have somebody, like, ready to go, basically, like, behind him?
I mean, the Angels pitchers are, aside from Shohei or Ohtani, just a bunch of jabronis.
Fair.
This is why they don't win.
Touche.
It don't matter. Some guy.
It also should be
Stop.
noted that Phil Nevin was the former third base coach for the New York Yankees who got fired because he was so bad at sending people and not sending people, including that ridiculous send in the wild card game against the Red Sox last year.
bothered learning his name.
Yeah, because I knew I had heard the name before. I was like, who
remember
the
that.
hell is this? Because I saw
my
Yankees
God.
Twitter had a fit.
Yeah,
over
our
Phil
third base
Nevin.
coach was terrible. To be fair, we've also had a little bit of rough time with our third base coach this year. Just today, Josh Donaldson got thrown out at home in the first inning.
Well, that could just be Josh Donaldson's fault.
Nah, that could be. That's true.
Yeah. Phil Nevin's son, Tyler Nevin, plays for the Orioles. It all comes around full circle. Is that it for baseball? Was anything happen?
That's some fantasy stuff happened. I tied.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Fantasy baseball. Yeah, so Eric and I don't know who you played this week.
Corey
tied.
I
Corey
played
Fong.
the other Corey. Yeah, we tied.
Yeah, tied. Obviously it came down to Sunday Night Baseball, but like there was it Kimbrel who blew a save or somehow didn't get a win that would have put you over the top
So
or
what-
something
what
like
happened,
that?
What happened was, and I didn't realize this because I turned the game on when it was already at the bottom of the 10th, and it was 3-3, and there was a runner on second, or there was runners on first and second. So I assumed coming in when I turned the TV on, I was like, okay, Kimbrel came in, he walked this guy to make it first and second with no outs. So I was like, okay, whatever. If he gets out of this inning, he has a chance at a win because then the Dodgers would come up and they scored 2 runs, and then the next guy, Gratterall, came in and finished it off. So that all happened, but I didn't realize that Kimbrel had given up a hit prior to that walk, and so he had already given up the tying run. I didn't realize the Dodgers were actually up 3-2, and that he had already blown the save. So I'm thinking the whole time I'm about to pick up 3.5 points for the win, and that's going to push me over the top because I was only down by 1 point. And then suddenly it pops up that I only picked up 1 point, and it was a tie. And I clicked on it, and it said blown save minus 2.5, but here's a win plus 3.5. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And, of course, Tommy Edman decided that he was going to have the game of his life and lose me 2 points today or yesterday or Sunday.
Playing the Pirates.
Yeah.
With me in the stands.
Yeah, jeez. And then I think Kyle Tucker had a negative 1.75, and I'm just like, it's like you guys just had to not strike out one more time. Roll over and ground out. Not do a double play, just a normal ground out, and we would have won. And I'm just sitting here looking at this tie. In a sport like fantasy baseball where
y'all scored 158.75 points.
Yes, and somehow we both scored exactly that.
Like, how does that happen?
It's like nothing happened. Like I was
like at least when Andrew and William battle Todd in fantasy football, we were only going to tenths of a point, and I don't think either of them scored 100. Like it was like 98.1 to 98.1 or something along those lines.
This is ridiculous. I was just like, come on. And so the first thing I asked was like, do we have any tiebreakers for fantasy baseball? And I figured the answer was no.
Yeah, only for playoffs.
And I was like, I'm sure stat corrections aren't common in baseball because it's pretty straightforward. You get a hit or you don't.
Like, so occasionally when I'm like so the way that I record the stats for our records is like every morning I go on and I put in like each of our lineups and the stats that they accrued, and my spreadsheets automatically populate like the scores at that point. And so every so often, like I always check after I've done it, like does the score that the team has for the week match what is on Flea Flicker? And occasionally I'll see like, oh, there's like a small discrepancy, and I'll see like, oh, somebody had like a reached on error that was changed to a hit or vice versa earlier in the week, and I'll update that. And so that does happen occasionally, but it seems like usually with Flea Flicker, even if that happens after the fact, once a game is over, they don't seem to apply those. So like it's a tie.
Jeez.
Well, and I don't have time to go back and look through all of the game scripts to see if that happens later on.
I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I had a tie in fantasy baseball. That's cute.
So you're 3-7-1 now.
Yeah. And Corey Fron is 7-3-1. And I'm now a game and a half behind Corey Fron or something like that.
And for the privilege, I get to play Evan again this week.
Yeah, and who you lost in a game where both of you scored 200 points.
Absolute slobber knocker.
Barn burner.
I don't think that's going to happen again this week.
You had a good start to it yesterday.
A good start, but not a 200-point week start.
No, but neither did Evan. So.
But Evan's team
Jordan Montgomery got toasted yesterday.
Oh, did he really?
Your boy. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I started him against the A's. The A's don't have any players.
Yeah, it's like Patrick Sandoval destroyed the A's, and we didn't even know that man existed until like a month ago. So there's that.
Right. Yeah, because I picked him up while sitting in the stadium. I was like, oh, this guy. He's pitching against the A's. Start him.
Yeah, I targeted the A's a couple of times after that, and it paid off. So I get why I haven't. Kyle Tucker's got 6.75 points today. Where was that on Sunday, you clown? Needed that, so I didn't tie. Jeez.
Well, that means I only have 19, but all my players are always on the West Coast, and you get a bunch of guys starting. This is exciting radio. So yeah, my fantasy baseball team rolled to a win over somebody. District Dingers, 181-93. So yeah, it might not have even been that close. Let's see. So I guess that's it on baseball. So we're going to mention some college football right quick. So the Atlantic Coast Conference is going to scrap divisions in football starting in 2023 with a 3-5-5 scheduling structure. So each school will have 3 other schools that they're designated to play against every year. Georgia Tech's 3 annual opponents are going to be Clemson, Louisville, and Wake Forest. And then you're going to play 5 of the other 10 teams one year, and then 5 of the other 10, or the other 5 of the remaining 10 the other year. So you're just going to alternate, 5 and 5, and home. This is something I think they should have done years ago, to be honest, because with the divisions with 7 teams in each division, it just seemed like you're playing the same people over and over and over. but then never playing some teams from the other division. So like, Georgia Tech would have their 6 division games, would have their annual game against Clemson from the other division, and then one of the other 6 teams in the conference. Like, they for example, they wouldn't play Boston College hardly ever. They wouldn't play Louisville or Florida State hardly ever. I remember when I was in school, just couldn't wait for the matchup against Maryland. Georgia Tech rolled Maryland twice. It was amazing. Just want to remind some people who might have gone to Maryland about that. So I think this is a more fair way to do, the conference scheduling.
Yeah, and it's good because you'll play those other 10 teams in your division once on the road and once at home over the course of a 4-year period.
Yes. And then the top 2 teams by win percentage in conference will just play for the conference championship in Charlotte. So,
which makes the most sense.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And I mean, like in past years when one division was dominant, when it was Clemson and Florida State were clearly the best 2 teams in the conference.
But then they would have the one
de facto
of those 2, and then a crappy team from the other division playing for the championship.
Exactly.
I don't like the division structure in college football. I hope that, because I think the ACC is the 5th conference now to do this, but the other ones are not really major conferences. Like the American Conference did that after UConn left, and I think maybe the Mountain West has gotten rid of divisions, and there are 2 others, and I forget which ones they are, but they're not major ones. The SEC still has divisions. I don't think that they should have divisions. Big Ten still has divisions. I don't think it should. I think the Big 12 still has divisions, or maybe the
Big 12 does not.
Okay, so they might have been one of the ones who got rid of divisions.
Well, they don't play. They can all play each other once per
They just have
season.
19 games.
Yeah.
Or 9 games. 9 games.
They have fewer teams. So they were one of the conferences that got rid of it a while back. But yeah, I don't think that you should have divisions in college football. I don't get that, and I really don't like that when you do have the clear-cut 2 best teams are both from the same division. What are we doing here? They should be playing against each other for the conference championship.
Yeah, but at the same time, thinking of it from a Big Ten perspective, Ohio State and Michigan are oftentimes going to be the 2 best teams in the Big Ten just because they're Ohio State and Michigan. They also always have to play. I don't care about divisions. They have to play a regular season game every year. It's a rivalry. They have to play. It's
the game.
That's the game. That's why college football exists. It's about the rivalry. It's about the petty. So in that situation, since they play each other a lot of times the loser is going to fall beyond just being in second place and then re-up in the conference championship game. They might fall to 3rd. So that doesn't really prevent the issue of 2 best teams making it. It's more of a matter of you're now likely to tumble down the standings. And again, if the solution is don't have Ohio State and Michigan play each other every year, well, that's just a non-starter.
I'm certainly not going to suggest that.
That is blasphemy among college football fans. Same thing with the Iron Bowl. Stuff like that has to stay.
But at that point, they might be the 2 most talented teams, but they aren't going to have the 2 best records. And so, they shouldn't play against each other again anyway. But if they do both somehow end up having the 2 best records, despite one of them losing to the other during the season, they should play again for the conference championship.
Back-to-back weeks?
That could be hilarious. That would be fun. That would be awesome. We see it happen in professional football, so it's happened.
Yeah,
it's pretty fun when that happens.
Play in week 17 and then again in the wild card round.
Now week 18.
Or week 18 in the wild card round.
It didn't happen this year, but it's going to eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Remember the Bengals and the Jets that happened?
Remember the Eagles and the Cowboys?
Especially now that you have 3 games for each conference in the divisional round, as opposed to just 2
wild card round. Yeah,
the wild card.
Or the wild card round. Yeah.
So I think this will be fun. Hopefully, when the SEC adds Texas and Oklahoma, after all the lawyers get done with that breakup of them from the Big 12, they go to a pod system where it'll be 16 teams in the conference. and everybody has their permanent sort of group of four, and all four play each other every year, and then they sort of rotate among the other three pods.
Yeah, it probably won't wind up being quite as neatly structured as the ACC just because of the number of teams, but something like that I think is it's the most fair.
Yeah, and that'll be fun as well. Similar to 2017, Auburn beat Georgia in Auburn, and then Auburn beat Alabama the next week to go to the SEC championship game in Atlanta, where they played Georgia again. Like, it was just, over 14. No, there's a week off. Over a 3-week stretch, they played the top two teams in the country, just all in a row. So stuff like that could happen. Let's move on from college football. Can't wait for college football season, right? That should be fun. Tennis. Serena Williams returns to singles competition for the first time in a year. She is searching for her 24th career Grand Slam title to tie Margaret Court. I believe I saw an ESPN alert saying she lost today. Is that accurate?
I hope not. I think today may have been the first round of Wimbledon.
Yeah, I don't know when the women started.
I'd be a little bit disappointed if she lost
from
today.
2 hours ago.
Yep, she lost.
Breaking news: Serena Williams falls to Harmony Tan in Wimbledon's first round in her first singles match since injury last year.
Because I really want her to at least tie Margaret Court, if not take the record from her.
I mean, obviously that would be nice.
I don't know who Margaret Court is.
Margaret Court was little, and by a little I mean a lot, very racist.
Oh yeah.
Also competed,
very anti-gay, very racist.
Competed before the Open era, so she's basically the George Mikan of women's tennis. Meaning, who cares? She's a fake winner. She was
a fan of apartheid in South Africa, and she is very anti-LGBTQ.
I mean, to be fair, so is Ronald Reagan, and we let him be president. So there's that.
So was the Orange Foal.
Yeah,
remember him?
I'm sure Donald Trump was a fan of it too.
Well,
nothing going on in the news about him, right?
No, nothing at all. If you stick your fingers in your ears and go la 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 instead of watching some C-SPAN or any news channel, then nothing's going on regarding him at all.
Did I start Carrasco today? Yeah, I did, and he's getting rocked. I knew that was a bad idea. But I had to start. I had to either start him or somebody facing the Yankees. I was like, this is going to be bad. One of these guys. These guys are both getting.
I probably would have gone with neither, personally.
I didn't. I counted up the starts. So I was like, I got to go with one of them.
Well, speaking of pitchers, back to the Angels. Got an ESPN alert here from an hour ago. Reliever Archie Bradley fractured his elbow trying to join fight versus Seattle and will be out at least 4 weeks.
Oh my God. Jeez. So, that happened. So, kids, don't get in a baseball fight because it's dumb. That's really all there is to it. The Tour de France, Corey, you put this. This it's
Tour
de France
page.
Season. It's almost July. The Tour de France begins this Friday, so I figured I would do just a quick rundown of some of the riders to watch, the teams to pay attention to over the course of the next basically 3 weeks. So the tour will begin this Friday. It'll conclude in Paris on the Champs-Élysées on Sunday, July 24th. One thing that's really annoying about this year's tour is that it's going to begin with an individual time trial, and I hate that. I do not like when the tour begins with that. I'd much rather see 1 or 2 stages take place before that first time trial. But this is going to be a pretty grueling tour. Out of the 21 stages, 13 of them are classified as either hilly or mountain stages. And for context, last year, only 11 of the 21 stages were classified that way. So this is going to be a pretty grueling tour, really fun tour to watch. Just figure I'd go through some of the individuals to watch. So kind of going almost in more or less in reverse order of interest. You've got Frank Bonnemer from B&B Hotels, KTM. He was really fun last year. I don't really know if he's going to be up to the same task this year, but he joined 6 breakaways in last year's tour, and he held on for 4 top 10 finishes in those stages, which is really remarkable. It made him the obvious choice for the overall combativity award, despite not earning that recognition in any of the individual stages. So I don't know if he's going to be, as aggressive this year. It may not really end up being much of a tour for him. You never really know with that sort of award. A lot of people don't win it back-to-back years, but with how aggressive he was last year, definitely worth watching to see if he gets in any breakaways, because if he does, those are going to be some fun stages to watch. Rigoberto Urán from EF Education Easy Post. He's a 3-time Tour de France runner-up, so always worth watching. Last year, he was in 2nd place in the GC after stage 16. And while there was a 5-minute gap from him up to Tadej Pogačar, he could have closed that gap, but instead he wound up finishing 10th because he had an absolutely disastrous stage 18 where he cracked on the Col du Tourmalet and lost 9 minutes on the leaders. Geraint Thomas from Ineos Grenadiers, always worth watching, a former Tour winner. Thomas won the 2018 edition, but he had a pretty rough 8th stage last year that took him from just outside the top 10 in the GC battle to outside the top 40. He's a really likable rider, though. He suffered a lot of unfortunate crashes in his career in the Tour. And 2018 was really the one year that he avoided those, and he wound up winning. So hopefully he can have a rare crash-free Tour this year, and we can find out what kind of shape he's in. Definitely best of luck to Geraint Thomas, former member of Team Sky, which is now called Ineos. Chris Froome, who was Geraint Thomas's teammate on Team Sky and now rides for Israel Premier Tech. I don't really know if Froome is still a contender at this point. He won the Tour de France general classification title 4 times between 2013 and 2017. And his last major Tour victory was in 2018 at the Giro d'Italia. So his days of contention are probably over, considering that was 4 years ago. But still, he's a super likable guy. Always worth hearing what he has to say in the pre- and post-race interviews. He crashed in stage 1 last year, and while he did manage to nurse his way through the entire Tour, it took him out of contention right off the bat. So this is another guy who I would love to see what he's capable of if he can stay upright in this year's Tour. Then we start to get into some of the actual contenders for this year's Tour. Starting with Primoz Roglic from Jumbo-Visma. He's a 2-time top 5 finisher at the Tour de France. He placed 2nd in 2020, but he did not finish last year's Tour. He crashed on day 3, and while he did try to battle through, once he was dropped along with basically everybody else by Pogačar in stage 8, he wound up withdrawing from the Tour ahead of stage 9. But if he can stay healthy through this year's Tour, he's going to be right there in it. I'll kind of come back to him in a minute. And then there's Jonas Vingegaard, also from Jumbo-Visma. 2021 was just an absolutely wild Tour de France. You think about it, Vingegaard finished 2nd in both the young rider and the general classification divisions. You don't see multiple young riders break onto the scene at around the same time usually, but last year we had that. So Vingegaard returns this year. Last year he finished 2nd place, 5 minutes and 20 seconds behind the winner. So he's going to be pushing for the GC title this year, I'm sure. And if he and Roglic can both remain healthy, they're teammates, so they're only going to help each other as they look to break their competition, in particular that being Pogačar. Then you got Romain Bardet from Team DSM. This is a guy I would not have expected to really be talking about heading into this year's Tour, but he looked great midway through the Giro d'Italia. Unfortunately, he got sick during stage 12 of the Giro, and though he was still in 4th place and just 14 seconds behind the pink jersey leader, he wound up having to abandon the Tour during stage 13. So hopefully he's not only recovered from that illness, but also is in still some good cardio shape and can make a run in the GC in this year's Tour. Because you have to know Bardet's name as a cycling fan, in particular as a Tour de France fan, because he's carried the weight of France's hopes in cycling basically since he made his Tour de France debut in 2013. Once it was clear that Thomas Voeckler's 10-day stint in yellow in 2011 would not be repeated. So definitely hoping for the best for Roman Bardet. Got a couple of sprinters that we got to talk about. Peter Sagan and Edvald Bosenhagen both riding for Total Energies. Sagan is not the untouchable sprinter that he once was, but he is still probably the best bike handler in the Tour, certainly the best I've ever seen in a major cycling tour, and he's become more likable every year. Now he has a strong sprinting teammate, and the question right now is, everything else being equal, will Total Energies throw their primary support behind Sagan or Bosenhagen? But either way, the two of them definitely give their team two great chances at the green jersey. And that brings us to the big guy, Tadej Pogačar from UAE Team Emirates. He's coming off back-to-back Tour de France GC victories. Before last year's 5-minute and 20-second victory margin over Jonas Vingegaard, he defeated Vingegaard's current teammate and his own former teammate, Primož Roglič, by just 59 seconds in the 2020 edition. It was a very close Tour de France a couple years ago. He seems to be the current face of cycling and could be for years to come, given he's only 23 years old. The big thing is I'm just hoping he doesn't absolutely run away with it this year, because it's always more fun to see multiple riders in contention as you get to those later stages. But Pogačar definitely comes into this year's Tour the favorite to win a third straight. And that is my rundown of the riders to watch for the Tour de France. So I'm excited to watch as much of it as I can. I don't know how much I'll be able to catch, because most of the tour is going to be taking place during my honeymoon. But it's going to be a fun race. I always really enjoy watching the Tour de France.
Alrighty, well there you have it, everybody. Let's see. Gonna turn it over to Eric, who's going to talk about the NBA. So the NBA draft happened, and Paolo Banchero went pick number 1 to Orlando. Did they pick first?
Yes, the Magic had the number 1 pick.
Okay. Banchero's out of Duke. The only other thing I know about him was that he was at a NASCAR race. I want to say it was the Daytona 500. And some people tried to interview him thinking he was Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I remember that too. Taller guys, and not quite, doesn't really look the same either.
Doesn't look the same at all.
He's a light-skinned black guy, so they just were like, hey, they all look the same, I guess. It's bizarre.
No, it's obviously Patrick Mahomes. What?
What's next? He's Steph Curry? I mean, come on,
right,
man.
Exactly.
It reminds me of when Bill Simmons was, when Mahomes was on the come-up in 2018, and he said that this is the NFL's version of Steph Curry. I'm like, I feel like you only said that because he's a light-skinned black guy. I don't understand how there's a comparison between those two guys at all. But anyway, so talk a little NBA. I don't have a whole lot to say about the draft. As I kind of said last week, I'm not really a draft guy. I'm more of a, pick the players, and then I might peep some of the more interesting prospects for about 5 seconds if I can. And I'm really, really bored in their summer league games. And then, I'll see what they do in October when the season starts. There's not really much for me because I don't watch college basketball closely enough. I don't scout players. I don't really know, I know there's a ton of differences between the NBA and the college game, but I wouldn't be able to point out, well, this guy wouldn't be able to get away with that in the league, right? Like, I don't have that level of basketball acumen to be able to do that. I know the NBA game, the college game, not really. I find it absolutely boring most of the time. So, anyway, so draft happened. So a quick shout out to, let me make sure I have this right. I wrote down my notes here.
Paolo Banchero.
No, shout out to him, and shout out to Oklahoma City for drafting 2 dudes named Jalen Williams. Yeah. That's great.
They drafted 2 guys with the same name in the same year.
They spell it differently.
Yeah, Jalen. Yes. One is Jalen, which I consider, for lack of a better word, the standard way, the more common way.
Spelling, yeah.
Like the Jalen Rose way. The Jalen Rose takes credit for the abundance of Jalen's existing now, because there is a correlation between when he came up with the Fab Five and people started naming their babies Jalen. And the other one is Jaylin. And also shout out to the Miami Heat for drafting a dude named Nikola Jovic, because Lord knows we don't need any more confusion there, especially with the Miami Heat, who love Nikola Jokic, very fond of him, as they were lining up for their photo op, Brouhaha.
Jokic and Jovic.
Oh my God! All right,
I already
so
get
confusing it all.
Jokic confused with somebody.
Oh yeah, with Doncic.
Doncic, even though they look
No,
nothing
not
alike.
Doncic. I know who Doncic is. Some other big white dude for Utah or something. Nurkic.
Well, Nurkic plays for the Trailblazers, but yes, Yusuf Nurkic is. Yeah, he's another one.
So does our boy Jeremy Grant now.
Yes, Jeremy Grant. I'll just talk about that now then. So a couple of trades connected to the draft somewhat. The Pistons acquired Kemba Walker, and the Knicks kindly stuck their lottery pick in his back pocket because they were just trying to shed salaries. So the Pistons were able to actually draft both of the dudes that they had as their top-rated prospects that they figured would be available. Hilarious. And for them, that also allows them a little bit of flexibility and the ability to say no to the Suns in any DeAndre Ayton trades because they were considered a top-level suitor for him. But the way they see it at this point, they don't really need to make that move because they've got some additional draft capital, these two guys that they picked, and they feel like, yeah, we don't really have to make that move in order to get this thing going. We can build around Cade Cunningham and these two guys.
I feel like the Pistons could be an up-and-coming team next year.
I like what they're doing
they'll
a lot,
be
yeah.
a playoff team, maybe even like a top 6 seed in the East.
I'm not ready to do that just because it's still such a young roster. They might need a year to just kind of coalesce, but
I would have liked it. I would have liked their chances better if they still had Jeremy Grant personally. But I mean, I think that they've got a really good young squad forming.
I mean, again, I haven't seen a lot of these guys play, so I'm not willing to commit to that. But obviously, I really, really like what they're doing. They have put together a really impressive rebuild in short order after the disastrous Stan Van era. So, love my boy Stan Van.
Your boy.
But he was not a very good general manager because he was handed the general managing duties when he was with the Pistons, and that was a disaster.
Unmitigated disaster.
What happened to Joe Dumars? He's not up there anymore.
He stepped down a few years back, I think. He was a guy that went from best GM of all time type of stuff to I'm gonna have to fire this guy because obviously he deserved a lot of credit for putting together the 2000s Pistons with Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton and Ben Wallace, but then tried a couple of other things to try to extend that window, and unfortunately they just didn't work, and that was kind of the end of that. But so I'm not sure what he's up to. Hopefully he's enjoying life as a Hall of Famer. I believe I don't think he made the top 75. I know Dennis Rodman did, so that's why Isaiah Thomas now has a teammate in the top 75. And that was something that he was proud of, that he was the only guy to win 2 championships without a top 50 teammate. Well, now Steph Curry is one of the only guys to win 2 championships without a top 75 teammate because Klay Thompson is apparently number 77. But anyway, we'll move to a little bit of other things here. Some free agency whispers.
Well, what did you think of the Jeremy Grant trade?
Right. Yeah, sorry, I missed that one. I think it's a good pickup for Portland. They're clearly trying something to make this team palatable for Dame. Like, he's made it clear he doesn't want to get traded. I don't know how much I really believe that because he could just be saying that to seem like he's extra loyal. But, they're building a team around him that has potential to win some games. Like, Anthony Simons took big strides last year. I feel like, they got rid of C.J. McCollum, but honestly, the C.J. McCollum, Damian Lillard backcourt was just never going to work because it's 2 small guards that can't play defense. That's just it's too much bad play on one side of the ball from 2 guard positions. So that was just something that had to be broken up. They had reached their ceiling. So I think that Jeremy Grant could be a nice addition. He could probably play some small ball 5 for them, and that would really suit the needs of Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers. That I think they could be competitive. They might be a playoff team again next year. Even though the West is really picking up, Portland's a big part of the reason why. They're also presumably going to get back in the mix, especially with Dame presumably going to be healthy. And so I'm excited to see what they do. And I guess we'll talk some free agency, or non-free agency in this case. We'll start with Russell Westbrook. He appears to have been committed to signing his opt-in for the Lakers. Can understand why.
For $47 million.
You're not going to turn that down.
Because who else wants him anyway?
Yeah, he certainly wasn't going to get anything close to that on the open market, so you got to cash that check. And that obviously leaves the Lakers in a position where they're going to have to stick it out another year for Russell Westbrook, which unfortunately for them, is an absolute crisis because you've got LeBron James, who I think is turning 38 this season, maybe 39.
I don't think the Lakers are going to make the playoffs next year.
They might not. That is a legitimate take from Corey. They might not make the playoffs. Like, if they don't do something, like
LeBron's turning 38 in December.
Okay, thank you. If they don't do something, I don't know. Like, I talked about it during the season. We know Anthony Davis missed a bunch of time, but even when he was on the floor, they didn't look that good. And Anthony Davis is going to miss time because he's Anthony Davis. That's just how he is.
Anthony Davis?
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
he's injury prone. And LeBron at this point is going to be 38. He's had injuries himself the last few years, injuries that never happened when he was younger, and that's a product of aging. And then you got Russell Westbrook, who seemingly is impervious to injuries, but is also just not a good basketball player anymore. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. He's just not that guy. And with that as your core, your three highest paid players being those three guys, you can't really improve the team in free agency because you don't have any money to do so. And so that leaves this team where it is, and where it was last year was terrible. Like, not just, we were disappointed because we didn't make the playoffs. No, you guys sucked. Like, we're absolutely garbage last year. And I don't see how they're going to get that much better this year. But sort of tying to the Russell Westbrook situation, and sort of indirectly, is Kyrie Irving's situation, where we had heard for basically 2 weeks that the Nets were tired of Kyrie, and maybe Kyrie was tired of the Nets, and seemingly they've all kissed and made up. Well, not really. It's more like the Nets couldn't move him because they even said to Kyrie, you want to go broker a sign-and-trade deal? Go find one. Go find a suitor that's willing to give us something back in return to make this work. And the only people that were interested were the LA Lakers, and the only way they were going to be able to make it work is if they sent Russell Westbrook to the Nets, and the Nets said, no. We're not interested in making that happen. So Kyrie's only options at that point were he could opt out and become a free agent, at which point he would sign with the Lakers, but only if he took the mid-level exception, which is only $6 million. So in order for the privilege of playing with his buddy LeBron James again, he would have to take about a $30 million pay cut. He ain't doing that.
I don't know about you, but I personally wouldn't want a $30 million pay cut.
No, and given the fact that Kyrie Irving, a lot of people were entertaining this notion. Like, well, of all the people that would do something unconventional, it would be Kyrie Irving. I'm like, Kyrie Irving is unconventional, but something very status quo about him is his selfishness. Right. Like, he's not going to turn away money.
No.
Like, you might say, well, he turned away money this year by not playing. It's like, he didn't have to play. That's the key. He got to sit at home. Mm-hmm. Here, he would be taking a sixth of the money to still play the same number of games. So, therefore,
more money than he played last year.
Yes.
More games than he played last year.
Like, he actually probably made more money with the Nets last year, even though he only played 29 games, than he would make making $6 million for the whole damn season.
Yeah.
So that's not something that he's interested in. And more importantly, even if Kyrie decided to give that a go, the NBA Players Association would be having none of that. Because it's their business to make sure that their top players get paid what they're supposed to, market value. And while Kyrie Irving is a head case, $6 million for Kyrie Irving services is not market value.
No.
So that was simply not going to work. So that leaves the Nets in a trick bag because it's pretty clear they weren't willing to offer him a long-term extension because, duh. And apparently neither was anybody else except for maybe the Lakers because they're desperate and they need to try to cash in on what's left of LeBron James and Anthony Davis's window together.
Yeah, the shorter version of which is also duh.
Yes, we know this. So he's stuck with the Nets, and the Nets don't want him, and he probably doesn't want the Nets. But what choice do you have? And normally I would say, okay, but normally a professional athlete would say, all right, well, I'm stuck here, but I'm getting paid, and I've got a great teammate in Kevin Durant. I've got a roster that is incomplete at this point, but certainly capable.
Ben Simmons, what are you talking about?
The roster is incomplete at this point because the third highest paid guy may or may not show up for work either, along with the second highest paid guy. But at the same time, this feels like a team where if all goes right, which is, again, huge if.
That's a lot of if.
Yeah, it's a lot of if. They could contend to win the East, but there's a lot that has to happen. But it's the only choice Kyrie Irving has. Like, what's he going to? If he's going to be a malcontent, then at that point, the Nets, who seemed like, according to Brian Windhorst, were just totally willing to let Kyrie go. And even if that pissed off Kevin Durant and made him want to trade, and they had to get rid of him, they were willing to spend a decade of time in just oblivion to just get rid of these two headaches. And I'm just like, that's crazy. Like, this man has pissed you off that much. That's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But
sometimes you just had enough. You're not gonna take it anymore. Like, you gotta go, man.
Yeah, it's like the in The Last Dance when Mike was talking about a situation where I guess Phil Jackson gave him a little bit of wisdom that Phil tends to bestow upon people, where he said, it's like, would you cure a headache with a bullet wound to your head? And Mike said, well, it depends on how bad the headache is. So apparently the headache is bad enough for the Nets to put the gun in their mouth in this case. So that's pretty nuts. So he's going to be stuck there. But the thing is, Woj pointed out that they can still trade him. But his value as a trade asset now is diminished because he's an expiring contract. So any team that would actually want the services of Kyrie Irving would presumably want them for beyond just this coming season. At which point Kyrie would just leave and be like, okay, well, you get nothing and like it. So the leverage he had was non-existent before, and now it's somehow even worse. So there's no way he's going to, unless he just cries his way out of town, which is very possible, he's not going anywhere. And maybe the Nets at some point, if the season's not going well, say, hey, we'll flip him to the Lakers for Russell Westbrook and just eat his expiring contract and clear up that $47 million in cap space and go from there, going into the 2022 offseason or 2023 offseason. Maybe they do that, but we're a long way from that. It looks like, for the time being, Kyrie Irving is going to be a Brooklyn Net, and presumably so is Kevin Durant, unless KD still says, this is insane, get me out of here, which it doesn't appear like that's going to happen. It feels like Kevin Durant, for whatever reason, rides or dies with Kyrie Irving. So here we are.
That. Yes, that's Kyrie Irving. That's the Duke education for you right there. The earth is flat, and you anti-vaxxer and stuff.
I love also how Kyrie basically said, as he tweeted out when he announced that he was going to return to the Nets, like, basically, I'm a guy who likes to do things differently. I'm like, but you did the most obvious thing that everybody would do.
Yeah.
Like, you literally did the same thing that Russell Westbrook did with the Lakers. And that brought me to a point where I heard some talking heads meandering on the radio about, Russell Westbrook and claiming that they use the phrase that, he's, like, off the court, he seems like a really great guy, but he's a bad teammate. And I take issue with that, because calling somebody a bad teammate is suggesting that they have bad character.
Yeah, then how can you be a good guy off the court?
There's no such thing as a bad teammate that isn't. That's a very personal attack. Like, that is always. If I say you're a bad teammate, I'm suggesting
you're a bad person.
Yeah,
essentially,
you have shortcomings as a person that make you a bad teammate. And I don't think that's the case with Russell Westbrook. I think people use that term, and I can see why Russell Westbrook gets frustrated with people like guys in the media like Skip Bayless, where they make their criticisms very personal.
I think his skill set just doesn't necessarily complement a lot of other players' skill sets in the NBA. And from that standpoint, he's not the greatest person to have as a teammate.
He's not an ideal teammate.
That doesn't mean that he's a bad teammate or that he's like he's selfish or anything like that. He's a little bit of a ball hog, but
he's a ball dominant player. Like, I'm not saying he's willing to pass. He only.
Obviously, he does average more than 10 assists per game.
Yeah,
in some
it's not like he has to shoot every shot. But the thing is, to me, when you say somebody's a bad teammate, I read that as, this guy's not a team player,
right?
Which is
not
definitely an attack on your character. It's a suggestion that you're selfish, that you're self-absorbed, that you can't see beyond your own ends. And so that rubs me the wrong way, because Russell Westbrook has shown nothing but dedication to winning. He's just not very good at it, because, to be frank, he's no longer a very good basketball player. That doesn't make him a bad teammate. He's just wired a certain way to play the game This is how he got to the NBA. This is how he built a Hall of Fame career. This is how he earned an MVP. And unfortunately, those skill sets have eroded enough to the point where not only is he not at that level anymore, but he's an outright detriment on the floor. That doesn't make him a bad teammate. It just means he's a washed-up basketball player. Kyrie Irving's a bad teammate. Like, this man goes out of his way to not help his teammates. He screws them over repeatedly and deliberately. That's a bad teammate. So let's not get it twisted comparing Russell Westbrook to Kyrie Irving. Like, that is a totally off base. Throwing out the bad teammate phrase. It applies to one and not the other. Just my little rant there. So before we finish up here, I forgot about John Wall. John Wall.
He's easy to forget about.
Unfortunately, that is true, Evan. John Wall
He's played 0 games since
forever. Yeah.
Right.
Did he actually
Eric, I gotta cut
play
you
a
off
game
right
for
quick.
the Rockets?
Okay, go ahead, Evan. You cut me off.
Gunnar Henderson has hit for the cycle tonight.
Ooh, my favorite stat ever. I love cycles. Nothing's better than a cycle.
Yeah.
Yes. So Gunnar Henderson
I don't want
beating
Steve
down
Triples
the
and 2
Orioles'
home
door
runs. I
right
want a
now.
cycle.
Yeah, but regardless, it's still 4 hits, including 3 extra base hits. It's still a good game. But yeah, that's awesome. So anyway, John Wall is apparently being bought out by the Rockets finally.
Did he actually play a game for the Rockets?
I think he did last year. He played a couple of games early in the season. I'm gonna verify that. But after that, the Rockets went into tank mode, and like I said, they didn't want Wall to go out there and accidentally win some games, so they just sat him down. But anyway, I thought it was strange, and of course, it's pure propaganda on Twitter. The people that mentioned actually played 40 games in 2020. I did not realize he was on the court that much. That's nuts. But
I see that as well.
The people on Twitter were saying John Wall's last full season, he averaged 23 points and 10 assists and did this, that, and the other. And I'm like, that was 6 seasons
5 years ago.
That was in 2017. We're going into the 2023 season. Are you kidding me? That was 6 years and an ACL or an Achilles rupture and a dozen other injuries and about
2 presidents ago.
It's a difference between being 27 and healthy and 33 or whatever and beat up. And a man that relied heavily on his speed is somehow on a busted up Achilles and at 33 with a lot of mileage on him is somehow
looking
going to
chunky in that picture too.
Yeah, sometimes John Wall he fat a little bit sometimes. It happened, but
taking the do break with Zion.
Oh my God! At the same time, I will say this: John Wall could be a contributor to the Clippers because he doesn't have to be the guy, and I don't know what his role actually is going to be with them. I don't know if he's going to come off the bench. I don't know if he's expected to start. I'd be worried if he's expected to start because then he is going to end up being the guy because, like Russell Westbrook in some ways, that's how he plays. And you probably don't want him to be the guy controlling the ball when you've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the court. So we'll see how that goes. But he could absolutely be a guy you bring in for 20 to 25 minutes as a sixth man type of guy, run the second unit, get some burn with one of those 2 guys and maybe set them up. He could be a contributor. The thing is, he's such a mystery because we haven't seen him at all. It'd be one thing if we had seen him and saw like, okay, this is the player he is now, and it's not as good as it used to be, but it's still serviceable. Or even if he was a bum, it would just be like, okay, at least we know that.
Right.
We don't know anything about John Wall because he played 40 games and nobody even knew that back in 2021. And another thing is he was playing with the tanking Rockets, so you can't really get a good read on how anybody's going to be as a veteran player playing with a bunch of guys who can't play at this point. They're 19 years old. They're learning how to play the NBA game, and he's out there just basically cashing checks. So I think that it's a mystery. I have a hard time believing this somehow makes them not better. Like, I can't imagine John Wall's that useless at this point that he wouldn't be able to contribute a little bit in some capacity, but I wouldn't get overly excited about this signing. I just think that, if you look at the Clippers, I've said it, if they're right and if they weren't the Clippers, you could pencil them in for a Western Conference Finals meeting potentially with Golden State because they've got that much talent. Problem is they've got Kawhi Leonard coming off of an ACL tear. They've got Paul George who had a shoulder injury that caused him to miss a bunch of times, and he's had recurring issues. Both of those guys are in their 30s. They just picked up John Wall, who's obviously injury-prone and in his 30s.
And they're the Clippers.
And yes,
well
the
rested,
most important thing is they're the friggin' Clippers. So, let's not get too excited here. But I still understand from an outside perspective, if we ignore the fact that they're the Clippers, they could be something here, and I think that they're going to be a team to watch. We'll just see if they crash and burn like they typically do. Okay. So, before we finish up basketball, we got to talk about Draymond Green. And you guys probably think I'm going to talk about Draymond Green and his beef with Kendrick Perkins, and I will. And you guys, or Corey can talk about that because he's listened to at least part of the podcast or maybe the whole thing. I don't know.
Listen to a good portion of it.
Yeah. But I also want to talk about the stuff that Draymond Green said today, which I personally take greater offense to, even though it wasn't as vitriolic as what he said about Kendrick Perkins. So we'll start with what happened. Draymond Green recorded, I guess, his first off-season podcast, if you will, where he talked about the parade and all the stuff and, the typical stuff. But then he started going on his revenge tour against your favorite media talking heads, namely Skip Bayless and also Kendrick Perkins, who is a regular on NBA Today on ESPN. And
PTI as well.
Yes, he's also a featured guest on 5 Good Minutes for PTI, and Tony and Mike just love Perkins. Well, Draymond has been on a crusade against what he considers the old media, which is these guys that didn't play basketball, or in Kendrick Perkins' case, didn't play basketball well, according to some folks.
And you know what? I think Draymond Green has a great point on all of that.
Yeah, and especially with Skip Bayless, who we've talked about, he's a glorified provocateur. He's a shock jock. He doesn't believe the stuff he says. He's just looking for engagement, for cheap stuff. And he's got a weekly TV show or daily TV show, I should say, 5 days a week on Fox Sports, which is off-brand ESPN. And he's got some crummy podcast that is very poorly produced, and somehow the man's making like $8 million a year. So clearly, engagement is his only means to earn money. But the Kendrick Perkins stuff was interesting. Before we get to the slur that Draymond threw out, which is what turned this to be something beyond the pale, in my opinion, that was more compelling to me before we got to that point, because these guys both played in the league at the same time. Or maybe not like year by year, but there was an overlap in their careers. And Perkins was a recently retired professional basketball player when he started working for ESPN. And Draymond is an active basketball player who works for Turner, who's got his own podcast, this, that, and the other. And Draymond sees Perkins as like the opposite of him, where Perkins has bought into I just say hot takes on TV for entertainment, and I push my personal agenda instead of analyzing the game. And I think Draymond's got a point about that. He's got a point about that for
I think he has a point about that. I think he also has a point about a lot of those sort of shock jocks like Skip Bayless and the guys like Kendrick Perkins. They tend to focus a lot of their talking points around tearing down players and not actually providing like when you criticize somebody, it should be constructive criticism. Like, explain why what they're doing is not good. Like, why are they struggling on the court? Why are the numbers not good? Why do you think that they're not very good? What is it that they could be doing that would make them better? And these people don't do that. And they don't really show, it's not just they don't show an interest in doing that. In most cases, they don't show an ability to do that. Like, I don't think Skip Bayless is capable of doing that. I don't think Kendrick Perkins is capable of doing that. I think that Draymond Green is absolutely right that Kendrick Perkins does not know basketball enough, despite having played it and at a fairly high level. I don't think that he understands the ins and outs of basketball well enough to actually provide constructive criticism. And I agree with Draymond. I don't like the people who just tear down players. I like guys like JJ Redick who can actually provide real analysis, explain what a player is doing well, what a player is doing poorly, but ultimately is kind of rooting for everybody to do well.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. The thing that Draymond pushes, though, is like he kind of talks about these guys have agendas, and I don't want to get it twisted. JJ Redick has an agenda too, right? Like he's got his favorite players that he wants to pump up, and he's not going. He will sometimes do so beyond what I consider good takes. I think he's had some bad takes, but I still respect what JJ Redick's basis is. Like, he's coming from I know basketball, I love basketball, I did this for a living, and I can analyze basketball at a high level. I understand it to a greater extent than Stephen A. Smith does, than Chris Russo does, than any of the other morons that he has to go to battle with on First Take every day. And so I respect him. Like, I don't expect to tune in and agree with everybody's takes all the time. Like, I don't agree with some of the stuff that CJ McCollum has said. I feel like there's a little bit too much of I don't know, you could call it a favoritism or a seeking the approval of one Mr. Kevin Durant with some of the talking points that they have. And we'll get to that in a little bit with Draymond. But these guys certainly are more authentic with how they discuss the game, and the fact that while they certainly play favorites and hold other people in higher regard than they probably should at times, they don't take cheap shots. They don't criticize people to the point of, I'm calling you soft, or I'm calling you a derogatory nickname or something like that. Like, it's more like this guy doesn't do this as well, therefore I think this guy's better. Even if I think that take is wrong. That's an honest, good faith take.
Right.
That you make. Even if it comes from bias, even if it comes from a place that I don't think aligns with the facts, it's still like you're making a take because this is what you think. You're not doing this to piss somebody off or to get under somebody's skin or to get people to say, "Oh, Steph, did you hear what Skip Bayless said today on Undisputed?"
Right.
It's not like that for these guys. These guys are here to talk about the game that they love to play and they love to watch.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that.
So then Draymond decided to refer to Kendrick Perkins as a slur that I'm not going to say on here. But basically, in Draymond Green's vernacular, he was effectively calling Kendrick Perkins an Uncle Tom. And too far. Way too far. I thought that was over the line. I agreed with Draymond's criticisms of Kendrick Perkins when he says, I just do this for entertainment. I'm kind of, overcooking the takes. And he absolutely should have gotten on Kendrick Perkins when he said, I was rooting for LeBron James to tear his ACL in Game 7 because we were scared. I'm like, I
love the part where, J.J. Redick gave him a chance to, walk it back a little bit, and instead, Kendrick Perkins just, pushed it even further.
Yeah, he didn't do it. And I was just like, man, you said that on live radio in this case? Like, what are you doing? And I agree with Draymond going after him, but you can't call him that. Like, that's beyond the pale. And Kendrick Perkins was understandably upset by being labeled that way. And I hope Draymond apologizes. I'm not counting on him to apologize, but he was out of bounds for that one. And that was a little much. That's not needed. That's not helpful to anybody's cause, and certainly not appropriate to treat anybody that way. Regardless of what Kendrick Perkins has said about Draymond Green, whatever personal shots he has taken, Draymond took the bait here, and he came back with something that was completely out of bounds. So then today, Draymond was on JJ Redick's podcast, and they got to discussing probably their latest championship and yada, yada, yada. We know all about that. We talked about that on here quite a bit. But then JJ, pushing what I consider a bit of a JJ agenda, started talking about how I think that in light of this fourth championship that the Warriors won, that people are seemingly no longer wanting to give Kevin Durant his due credit for the championships they won in 2017 and 2018. And my response to that, just hearing that off the top of my head, I'm like, that's all everybody wanted to do was give Kevin Durant all the credit for those championships. So now the fact that they're retroactively maybe taking it away because they're like, well, damn, Steph won before you, and then Steph won with you, and then Steph won after you, and you did none of that when you weren't with him. I feel like it's like, why are you going to bat for Kevin Durant right now? We haven't seen him play basketball in 2 months. Like, he went home, got swept by the Eastern Conference Celtics, who Steph busted up in the finals. So this should be talking about Steph and the Warriors more so than bringing up Kevin Durant. But that's when Draymond seemingly started sucking up to KD a little bit, and some of the takes I was okay with. I didn't agree with them necessarily, but I was okay. Like, saying that the Warriors wouldn't have beaten the Cavs in 2017 and 2018 without KD. I was like, okay, maybe in 2017 I'd agree with that, Not in 2018 after Kyrie had skipped town. I was like, there's no way that Warriors team is going to lose to that Cavs team.
Even without KD.
Yes. If the normal core Warriors, they absolutely would have beaten that 2018 Cavs team. And then he said something along the lines of dealing with the 2018-2019 Rockets, who gave the Warriors the most trouble out of any team that they'd faced during the KD Warriors era, that Draymond said, we would have beaten them no matter what. They weren't going to beat us. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, Draymond, this feels like you're just wanting to prop up LeBron here and say LeBron's too good and James Harden couldn't hang with us no matter what. And I'm like, well, the Rockets got a lot closer to beating y'all with KD than those Cavs teams ever did. Like, you beat those Cavs teams in 5 and 4.
Right.
You beat those Rockets teams in 7 and 6.
So if you could not have beaten the Cavs in either of those years, or even just 2017 without KD, how do you expect that you're going to beat the Rockets in both of those years without KD?
And the thing is, I don't disagree with the idea that the Warriors could have beaten those Rockets teams without KD, because KD got hurt during the second Rocket series. It was 2-2, and Steph took over, and they won the next 2, and they went on to the Western Conference Finals. So it's not out of the question to say that Steph Curry and the Warriors' original core...
But they're not consistent statements to be making. They're not...
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's strange to disrespect a team that put you to the brink to prop up a team that didn't come close to doing that when you faced them at full strength. So a little bit of inconsistency there. But the big issue with the take that I had with Draymond was he started explaining his take about the Cavs. And his take was based on the idea that around the conclusion of the 2016 postseason, that teams had supposedly figured out the Warriors' motion offense. And like, okay, that makes some sense. You know, you have a scheme, people adjust to your scheme, and, you know, typically it bears some type of fruit. Where he went over the top and said some ridiculous stuff that he should have kept to himself was when he suggested that the teams were figuring them out, and that at that time in Steph Curry's career, Steph Curry wasn't that guy that could go just get you a bucket at will. And the KD was, so they needed KD. And I'm like, Draymond, you just said basically that you lost that series in 2016 because Steph wasn't good enough and you needed somebody better. And to me, I'm like, that's insane. That is absolutely insane.
Wasn't that the year of the Draymond flying kick to the groin that got him suspended?
Yes, which is the main reason they lost that series. And
Draymond revising history a little bit.
Yes, and so the thing is, I hear that statement, and what's bothersome about that is a common criticism of Steph that was completely unfounded was Steph's not the guy to go get you a bucket. He's not a guy that you can say, all right, here's the ball, go score. We need one from you right now. If you've ever watched Steph Curry play, you know that's not true. And so Draymond obviously realized Steph clearly just proved that, you know, over the last few weeks, that he's more than capable of busting up a great defense pretty much single-handedly. So Draymond sort of said, back then Steph wasn't as strong, he wasn't as physically capable, and he kind of grew that part of his game, but he wasn't there yet. I'm like, Draymond, Steph was a 2-time MVP.
Yeah.
He was the scoring champion. You don't win scoring titles without being able to go get a bucket.
Right.
That's the whole point of scoring, is you can go get a bucket.
Yeah.
And this man did that more than anybody.
He was doing all this before KD got there.
Yes. So this idea was, like, you can make the claim that teams figured you out. That's fine. You can make the claim that your offense bogged down when teams threw double teams at Steph. I think that's totally fair. I think it's totally reasonable to say, yeah, when they doubled Steph and we had to play 4-on-3, we didn't have reliable enough offensive pieces to make them pay consistently. I'm like, yeah, and who's the main reason that's the case? Draymond Green. He's the main culprit in that regards. He's the most ineffective offensive player on that Warriors team in 2016. And Harrison Barnes couldn't make an open three to save his life in either of their finals appearances that he was with them. But to sit there and say it was because of Steph? Are you out of your mind? Like, that's just a nutso take, and I don't even know if Draymond understood that that's what he was saying, but that's exactly what he said. And I was like, dude, you just revitalized a narrative that had been put to bed 2 weeks ago. You know, you just sat there and said, well, back then Steph wasn't capable of doing what he did, you know, when he was a unanimous MVP. And I'm like,
I can't imagine that Steph is very happy about that.
And see, the thing is, Steph is the type of guy that doesn't care about stuff like this.
I think he's the type of guy who kind of like shrug it off, and he's not going to get like pissed at Draymond. He's not going to make a big deal about it, but I can't imagine that he appreciates that from Draymond at all.
To be honest, this level of talk from your teammate, if I was Steph Curry, I don't see any issue if Steph Curry went to Bob Myers and Joe
so
Lacob
I don't want
and said,
him here anymore.
Get him out of town.
No, I wouldn't either. I don't think that's necessarily something that Steph will do.
He won't do it.
But I wouldn't blame him one bit.
Like I think that type of nonsense, and again, it's not like this is the first time Draymond has said something untoward. Draymond consistently has put himself under the microscope with what he said, his actions on the floor, and this all the while Draymond had a pretty hit or miss finals, and damn near cost them the finals. Like he played poorly in Game 3 and 4, and if they lose Game 4, they probably lose the series. They go down 3-1, you're screwed. Steph saved their asses in Game 4, so it's like, dude, your entire legacy is tied to this man.
And you're gonna tear him down, really?
Why are you giving any credence?
You're basically doing the same thing that you're getting upset about Kendrick Perkins and Skip Bayless for doing.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was trying to say it in a way that Steph got better. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if Steph got better, which I don't know if I agree with that.
What he's saying is incorrect.
I mean, Steph did get better, but he got better before that point.
Yeah, and
Steph had already gotten better. And yes, and you can say, oh, he's continued to get better, but he was already that guy in 2016.
Right, like the thing that you said was that Steph wasn't good enough when he was the MVP, leading you to the finals. And the thing is,
what more do you want?
The thing is, Steph had a bad NBA Finals in 2016. That was a big part of the reason why they lost that series in 7 games. But it just means he had a bad series. It's not an indictment of who he is as a player. A lot of great players have had bad series. LeBron James had that epic meltdown against the Mavs where he just completely shut down. He was probably mentally exhausted from having to play the villain the whole year, and he just didn't have it. You know, we know about Tragic Johnson in 1984. Like, this is a trend where a lot of players have series where it's like, damn, we just really didn't perform, and it cost you. It happened to Steph, and you know who it happened to before that happened? It happened to Kevin Durant against the Warriors when his team blew a 3-1 lead. And I seem to recall a lot of times where Kevin Durant was guarding Steph Curry one-on-one, and Steph Curry busted him up, went and got a bucket. And KD, who, again, I would never say just because KD lost that pivotal series in his career to the Warriors and he struggled mightily to make shots, that would be like me saying based on that, well, Kevin Durant needed to go to the Warriors because he needed a teammate that could actually go get a bucket. Like KD can't do that. You know how insane you would sound to say that? But you just said that about a scoring champion. You said that about a 2-time MVP.
And you said it about your teammates.
Yeah, it's just like, come on, man. Like, it doesn't all have to be prioritized around kissing the right amount of ass. And that's what it kind of felt like this was, where it felt like Draymond really wanted to agree with the notion that KD was integral. And you can believe that without saying that Steph was inadequate. You can say, well, damn, we really needed another guy that could create his own shot because if you double this guy, we didn't really have anybody on the back line. That's a perfectly normal take, and that's a big part of the reason why the Warriors were unbeatable with Kevin Durant. But to sit there and say, we didn't have anybody like that, including the 2-time MVP, just, what the hell are you doing, Draymond? Like, that's utter nonsense. And, of course, it's making waves on Twitter, and, I'm sure Draymond will have something to say about the people who have something to say about him. But I guess that's for another time. But I was so frustrated by this. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, really? Really? Like, coming from you, the guy who cost him one championship by getting himself suspended and then almost cost him this one because said player who you just knocked down a peg saved your bacon. You've got to be kidding me.
I think Draymond's just a type who just likes to be heard talking.
Well, yeah, he hosts his own podcast where he sits in his room with a microphone in his hand and just rambles. And don't get me wrong, Draymond Green is very entertaining. I think he's a smart guy. I think Draymond in general is a good dude, but he runs his mouth a little too much sometimes. I feel I've said the same thing about Steve Kerr occasionally. I'm like, dude, sometimes you get a little caught up in your own, look how smart I am.
You start smelling yourself.
You just need to settle down because the stuff you're saying, even if you don't mean anything negative by it, you got to choose your words more carefully. And this is not a case where Draymond Green, I believe, did not choose his words very carefully here.
As someone who used to host a podcast by himself, sometimes you do get to just be yammering for hours. And
It's easy to do.
You just say stuff that doesn't make any sense.
We do it here.
It happens now with 3 of us.
Yeah, we have 2 people here to tell us, all right, let me say my piece so we can stop you from going on and on and on. And it's like, yeah, but we still do it. It happens.
Yeah. Is that it on the NBA?
I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, nothing's happening. Next week we'll have, like, free agency starts this weekend or like this Friday, I think. So it looks like it's going to be pretty boring with the news about Kyrie obviously opting in, Russell Westbrook opting in. So not expecting too much magic happening, but something always cool happens. So we'll see.
Yeah. So in addition to Gunnar Henderson hitting for the cycle for the Orioles AAA team, Kyle Stowers has hit a home run as well.
Nice.
So yeah. So I mean, if you're on the Orioles right now and you're not doing so great, you got to be. I think you should have your stuff kind of packed and ready to go, right? If you're the Craig Gentry type or whoever, somebody like that, it's like, maybe I should rent and not buy. So yeah, we're gonna shift now before we get out of here to some more serious topics. So we got a mailbag question from Anonymous again this week. Shout out to you, whoever you are. Why haven't you been discussing Brittany Griner? And I mean, I guess we haven't been discussing Brittany Griner because nothing has changed. She's been locked up in Russia as sort of it seems like more of a political situation than her committing some sort of crime over there, right?
Yeah,
Russia and the United States aren't exactly on the best of terms.
So I think part of the reason that we haven't brought it up more than just, I think we mentioned it one time on the show when it initially happened back in February, where she was detained. Is we don't really know a whole lot about the legal situation of it. What is her precise legal situation in Russia? What is the United States doing about it? What can the United States do about it? I don't know all of those answers. But I mean, I think that it is worth discussing maybe just a little bit more, especially now that there are a few developments. So first of all, I am very much of the belief that a big part of Russia detaining her is a political move to, I mean, the timing of it seems pretty suspect considering she was detained literally a week or maybe a little bit less than a week before Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russia knew that the United States was not going to be supportive of that invasion. So I think that there was a little bit of a wrong place, wrong time element to it. Didn't help that she had some, I guess, cannabis oil or whatever in her luggage, but the charge of smuggling illicit substances seems like a little bit of overkill on the Russian government's part. But on the United States side, I think it's a really difficult line that you have to kind of toe, because on one hand, obviously, you do not support Russia holding on to a political prisoner who is an American citizen. It's a really terrible look for the United States in general, because the reason that she's over there in the first place is because we don't pay our female athletes well enough in the WNBA, and so they have to go play overseas to whatever country they can find that will offer them money to play, and they make a lot more money overseas than they do here. So it's a bad look on us in that regard. We're the reason that she was there in the first place. At the same time, I think that when you're the United States government, you also don't necessarily want to, go on and on too much about how important it is to us to bring her home, because then that gives Russia more leverage. It lets them know, this person is really important to you, so we're going to kind of put the clamps down even harder on trying to keep her, in our custody. So there's so much political bullcrap that you have to fight through in this situation. But right now we're now looking at, I believe I saw a report today that they are looking at they're planning to extend her, I forget what the word is, but they're basically going to keep her there for another 6 months, is what I saw, which is ridiculous. Maybe it's at 6 weeks and not 6 months, which is a pretty big difference. But either way, they're looking at keeping her in custody for a significant portion of time going forward. They had some sort of like a primary hearing yesterday, and no members of the United States Embassy were in attendance, but they're supposed to be in attendance when the actual trial begins later this week. I think on Friday is when that is supposed to start. But beyond that, like we just don't really know everything about the situation. Like, I don't know what is the United States capable of doing. Like, do we have a Russian political prisoner that we could swap for Brittany Griner? And is that something that we want to do? Like, I mean, I don't know if we have any Russian political prisoners, and if so, they might not be somebody that we're really willing to give up. At the same time, this is an American citizen we're talking about. Like, I feel like that needs to be the priority in these situations. So it's just a really messy thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say than that. I mean, we know it's complicated. You know, you would hope that the people in charge, you know, the federal government, president, Congress, whoever, would be taking whatever possible steps there were to get this done. But we just simply don't know
what those are.
Yeah, what's required. There are two parties here. There's us and there's the Russians, and I think it's understood that just about everybody on this side of the pond wants Brittany Griner home, wants her released, and wants this situation cleared up.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have to be aware that she was arrested on somebody else's soil. And in some ways that means, as much as you don't want to, you have to play by their rules a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel terrible for Griner's wife, who, to my knowledge, has not spoken with Brittany Griner since the day that she was detained. I don't believe that she's been able to talk to Brittany Griner since, I think it was February 15th, if I remember correctly. I mean, that's a long time to not be able to talk to your wife. And so far, the U.S. Embassy has not seemed to be able to do anything about that, which, again, I don't know how prison works or jail works or whatever in Russia. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just a mess that, I mean, I personally am really not qualified to speak on, to be honest, in terms of any sort of analysis or anything. So something else even worse has happened. So it's been a last Wednesday was a tough day for Baltimore Ravens community. So Wednesday morning we found out that outside linebacker Jalen Ferguson had passed away at the age of 26. I haven't really found more information, but I think he was drafted in 2019. So, you know, that's obviously sad. I think he has like 2 kids. It's just, you know, a tragic situation all around. I don't really know like what happened.
I know they were working on an autopsy, but I haven't seen anything since then.
Yeah. And then that afternoon we found out that former Ravens defensive tackle Tony Siragusa passed away at the age of 55. Siragusa played for the Ravens for 5 years from 1997 through 2001.
And a lot of people know him for his time on Fox as a sideline reporter. I think it was Fox, or was he on CBS? Either way,
he was on Fox.
He
was with Kenny Albert and Moose.
He was a sideline reporter.
Yes,
and definitely
Kenny,
entertaining.
Moose, and Goose. So yeah, so both these guys will certainly be missed. Oh my goodness. So, just shocking to find out these people are just gone. Just, you know, your phone just buzzes one time and find out somebody passed away. It's really, really shocking, really sad. So yeah, I think unless I missed something, I think that is all we have for you this week.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, I guess that'll do it for this week's show. Shout out to our anonymous mailbag person. If you would like to send us an email, please reach out to us at thesportsballers@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at sportsballers18. You can follow Corey on Twitter at Corey Puffett. Follow Eric on Twitter at Quagmire67. Follow me on Twitter at Evan_Ash13. You can find this podcast wherever you're listening to it right now. In addition, it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. If you are listening to this show and it's not on your podcatcher of choice, please reach out to us at the aforementioned Twitter handles and email, and we will get on there as soon as we can. Go ahead and like the Facebook page. Do we have any YouTube comments? I think somebody reached out to me and said we had a YouTube comment on our live stream that we missed last week or 2 weeks ago or something.
Last week? I did not see that one. I'll have to go and check, but I can tell you we had about 30 YouTube comments today, but all of them were very inappropriate.
What?
They were like spam. They were like spam bots.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
all right.
Yes.
Well, shout out to you,
So
spam
I've
bots.
already,
for listening.
apparently they're listening, but I've already deleted and blocked and put them in timeout and everything to get them off of our feed.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that'll help against the YouTube algorithm, right? We seem to be generating a lot of engagement. All right, I guess that's about it. Do you guys have any shout outs before we get out of here? I don't have any.
No, neither do I this week, actually.
Well, I had some, but I resolved them all during the show. I wanted to shout out Bryce Harper for handling his situation with as much grace as could be expected. And I made the joking shout-outs for Oklahoma City for having 2 Jalen Williams, Miami for having Nikola Jovic, and Jesse Winker for being an absolute clown. So that's all I really had, and we already had
Jesse
those.
Winker.
So there you go.
Yeah. Jesse Winker on one of my fantasy teams who's been hot garbage since day one, all year. I knew I shouldn't have drafted him. I should have drafted somebody else. I knew it. As soon as somebody gets acquired by the Mariners, their career goes downhill. It is over. I should know better. Right? Eric, I've been sitting next to you for hours and hours and hours all summer in cars and rides and airplanes. Should know better not to trust the Mariners' latest acquisition. So that one's on me. Jeez. All right. Well, I guess that'll do it. So yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Reach out to us at all those places. So for Corey and Eric, I'm Evan. This has been the Sports Ballers Podcast, and we will talk to you next week.